Hey, Rebel Bankers, this is your host, Chris Naugle, and welcome back to the show. I'm joined here with one of my friends, Evan Holiday from Holiday Ventures. And you might be thinking it's just always a holiday, but it's really not. And we're going to talk a little bit about Evan's journey to the success, to what his company does. And you guys really need to pay attention because in these times right now that we're in, he's doing something you probably should be doing. So what does he do? It's simple. Private partnerships. You might be like, what are private partnerships? Well, they're private partnerships using tax credits. You ever hear of those things called tax credits? That's what he does. And he uses those tax credits and private partnerships to build affordable housing. Why is that important? Well, that right there might be one of the most important topics of 2021, 2022, and who knows how far in the future, because there's not enough affordable housing and you want to get involved in this. So this is going to be a podcast you want to listen to because this just might be your ticket to the future. But before we get into Evan's story, and I'll have him tell you a lot about his company, let me talk about all of you. All of your journeys to becoming a Rebel Banker. That's what's important here. Now, you're here listening to this podcast to learn something, to get some new information, to educate yourself. And that's all good and great. But you know what? The person that said knowledge is power was full of beep. You get the drift, full of shit. And he was full of shit because knowledge isn't power. It's maybe a little piece of power, but the application of the knowledge is what really matters. If Evan just got educated on what he does and never did anything, never took action, nothing would have changed. Nothing at all. And that's the same for your journey to becoming a Rebel Banker. You got to take something that you learn here and you got to go out and apply it immediately. So I'm going to test you. You think you're an action taker? You think you're somebody that actually gets things done? Let's put your money where your mouth is, but no money involved. How about this? I give you something for free. Let me give you something for free that's going to get you to take action. I'm going to give you a copy of my book, The Private Money Guide, or you can have this one too, doesn't matter. Okay, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery. You want both? Great. You can get them both for free. But here's what you got to do. You got to actually take some action. You got to go to chrisnaugle.com and it's Naugle and click on free book. That's right. It's really difficult. One swipe on your finger, you click free book and you just tell us where to ship the book. You pay the shipping. We give you the book for free. Now that's action taking. So now that we got that out of the way, Evan, welcome to the show.
Yes. Thank you for having me, Chris.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. You got quite the bio. So let me just read a little bit about you. So you've been a real estate developer, an investor with over $225 million, 1,347 units. Man, I wouldn't want to deal with 1,347 toilets, termites, and tenants. But anyway, you can do that. And these are all multifamily real estate developments. And not only that, you're the CEO of Holiday Ventures. And we're going to talk a little bit about what your team does involving tax credits and all these awesome affordable housing communities that you build. And you also do some other things. You do some mixed income communities and you got a mission. This is important. Their mission is to create quality housing opportunities and empower the residents to realize their full potential. How many people actually care about that? The answer is not enough. So he's been the host on iTunes Top 200 Business and Real Estate Podcast, Monumental, which I was on his podcast. It was an awesome, awesome time. And he sits down with top leaders and entrepreneurs to make massive change in the world through his space. So Evan, tell everybody a little bit more about your business today.
Yes. Well, Chris, you hit it right on the head when you got started. Right now, I mean, what we do in the affordable space, and I think everybody's come to become very familiar with affordable housing, the need for it, why we need it, why it's important. But it's become so much more important, so much more needed, and so much more impactful for so many families out there. And really back that up, I mean, prior to COVID, there were 7 million families that needed affordable housing that were basically overpaying, paying vastly more than they could actually afford every month. They're paying 60% of their monthly income goes towards rent or a mortgage. And that, I mean,
COVID, that was pre-COVID?
That was pre-COVID. Yeah. I don't even know what the numbers are post-COVID. I want to know because I'm sure it's probably double that by now.
It's gotta be.
And that's the problem we're trying to serve and to solve here. And so that, we talk about solve big problems and you get big rewards. That's exactly what we're doing here. is we're filling a massive, massive void in the economy for affordable housing that cities and communities from the local level to the state level, all the way up to the federal level are all screaming and jumping up and down and saying, hey, we have a problem here. We're willing to incentivize investors and real estate developers like yourself who care about that problem and want to make a difference. And we're here to incentivize you so you have a financial incentive to do this. And so that's really what we do is we put together the pieces. We say, where's the need? How do we put these projects together? And how do we work hand in hand with the government to help make these projects a reality, to help fill the void? So they help pay for the project. And in return, we help keep our rents at an attainable price point. I think that's the most important piece of affordable housing is you're providing quality housing, brand new quality housing, and you're providing it at a price point where they're only paying 30% or less of their monthly income. That's the power of what we do. And so that's what we'll talk about today.
It's huge because I mean, there's just so many people that, I know I have tenants, lots of them. And, I've talked to many of them. They go around looking for apartments at $600, $700, even $800 a month. And like, they can't find anything, or what they find is something they wouldn't bring their family into. And it's interesting how, this whole, boom in real estate, the pricing of real estate's gone up, but also the price of rentals has also gone up. And there's really nobody out there that's trying to fix this problem like you are. I'm sure there is, but it's not even making a dent. There's a ton of people with high income or high, these lofts, these expensive high-end apartments. There's tons of that stuff. $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month rents. But that doesn't help the people that are struggling just to keep a roof over their family's head. That doesn't help people that after COVID now can barely put a meal on their family's table. These are the people that need help. And these are the people that you are trying to help. You've made it your mission to do that. But it's all good and great that that's your mission now. But this all began somewhere. Evan, let's go back in time. What was your first real estate deal? How did you ever get onto this whole thing of trying to tackle the housing problem in this country? It's just a wee little goal, but it didn't start there, did it?
No, that's exactly right. I think everybody, the very first building step to going on your path and finding your own success, I think starts with finding what you're passionate about and working towards that or working towards finding that passion. And so I didn't necessarily, one day say, this is what I'm going to do. It kind of, I stumbled on this path. I think for me, it really started in college. I realized early on that I hated pre-med. I hated science. I hated chemistry. I wanted something else. And I ended up finding this developer on campus announcing this big $55 million student housing, mixed use, retail on the first floor, new market tax credits. And I was like, man, that sounds really cool. I want to do something like that. Something about changing a neighborhood, building something from the ground up, literally putting your stamp on this earth and leaving a positive legacy on a community and the residents. That to me got me excited. And so I worked with that developer. Somehow I convinced him to be the first one he hired. And basically from there, just learned soup to nuts from that developer. So that was the best thing is, I didn't give up on asking him. I pestered the crap out of him to hire me and then got a bunch of people to his groundbreaking. So I broke through that barrier of, getting him to trust me. So that was the first step. And then the next step was me just learning all about housing and development. So learning from him, I learned the student housing market, but I realized it was this is fun, but I want something where I can actually give back and have positive impact and do good with what I'm doing. I want to make money too, but I want to also do good with the creation of our company. And so that led us down the path. I was through a business program at the university. We decided to start a company. And of course I'm like, well, let's start a mixed income housing development company. So we started a modular development company that focused on a mix of housing types, a mix of income levels. And that's really where I dove off the deep end into affordable housing, into impact investing and how you can do good with your capital and make recession resistant returns. So we started this modular development company in college, didn't know what we didn't know, stumbled along the way. But at the end of the day, I ended up getting a job offer from the top developer of affordable housing in the country. And at that point I was like, you know what, this is one of those breakthrough moments where I can say, yeah, I can learn from the best of the best in the country and I can get that direct mentorship and apprenticeship from somebody that has mastered that craft of exactly what I want to do. And that's when I realized I worked with them for many years and developed that craft, gained the experience. They threw me in the deep end and said, "Hey, figure it out." And that's exactly what I did. It was a lot of learning steps along the way, a lot of deals that, went south, a lot of deals I didn't get done. There was a lot of deals that, we closed at the 11th hour or took a lot of left turns. But, and then at about 2 years ago, left that venture and started my own venture, Holiday Ventures, where really putting more emphasis, like you talked about earlier, of, how can we not just build quality housing and provide the housing, but how can we take it a step further and say, hey, let's empower our residents. Let's educate them on finance. Let's do exactly what you're doing, Chris, and help people learn how the financial system actually works and how they can use it to their benefit instead of feeling like it's using them. Even thinking about how to help them with a healthy mindset, how to eat right, how to exercise, how to put together a resume, all those different things. We want to take it a step further and say, hey, we're not just going to give you the housing. We're going to give you support that you need to actually, take off and get out of affordable housing. We want them to eventually, invest in affordable housing. That's the level we're trying to play at.
Be the bank.
Exactly.
Now let's, like, when you were in college and you saw that $55 million multi-use building, how old were you?
I was 19.
So you're 19 years old and you saw a $55 million project and you're like, you know what? I want to know how to do that. A lot of people would look at that and be like, man, that's way too big, or 55 million. I could never do that, because that's that limited mindset that we're brought up with, especially in college. College, I got mixed views on it, but college seems to be a place where it's teaching you how to be an employee, how to actually go to school, get good grades, do all the things to go into a profession to work for somebody else and then climb. Now, you kind of saw this and you did end up working for somebody else, but you didn't really go there with the intent of working for somebody else. You kind of did that to mentor, to learn the ropes, to figure out what is this whole thing? How do we do that? And a lot of people, I think, fail to do that. They think, I want to get paid for everything I do. And you were just like, I just want to learn because that looks like a pretty awesome thing. And then today, how old are you now?
30 years old.
So you're 30 years old. And I asked that because a lot of people are just listening to this. They're not actually watching the recording of this. And you're really young to be doing the things you are, to have that many units, to have that many projects going on. So, what's it been like? I mean, you're talking about let's call it a decade, just to keep it simple. You're talking about a decade here. I mean, in that decade, you've gone from mentor or mentoree, I should say, or if I'm saying that right, person learning, to now owning the company, to now actually going out teaching other people what you were learning back then. How do you do that in that short of a period of time? Is it just you just don't sleep?
That's a great question, Chris. And I think it boils down to literally just putting in the work every day. It's not about feeling, I feel like we like those big quantum leaps or when we make quantum leaps, but it's not always about that. I think it's just about, we always have an expression in development is like, how do you get these things done? It's literally 1 inch every day, because you have to have patience in what we're doing. And I think early on, I did not have patience. I was like, man, I want to get these deals closed and I want to get a $30 million deal in 6 months. And I realized I'm like, oh, that's not 99 times out of 100, that is not possible. There's just so many limitations on, you're solving a massive problem like we talked about. So you need so many partners, you need all these people involved, you need all these approvals to do what we do. And so early on, I learned, I was like, okay, I need to have more patience if I'm going to be a successful developer, if I'm going to embody what it's like to be a successful developer. And that, I think, was one of the hardest things I've learned. I'm still impatient, but I've learned to be impatiently patient. And I think that's huge for any entrepreneurs. Like, just worry about what you're working on today and knowing that each little, chip that you chip away will get the ball moving, will get the momentum going, we'll get the snowball rolling down the hill. And eventually you get halfway down the hill and it's just taking off and you're like racing to catch up to all the momentum. I think that's what it felt like for me is, even once we started our company 2 years ago, I was like, man, I got to start from square one. I've built up this book of business with this other company. Now I have to basically start all over. And that was, in some ways, I was like demoralized. I was like, man, what are we going to do? Like, I need capital now. I need, backing. It's easy when you have big name and big money behind you. Now I have none of that. And so going into that, it was demoralizing, but, we just worked at it. We worked at it. We looked at lots of deals. We found partners. We found capital. We just every day, just little by little, I think that's the really important thing to remember. And now we're working on, I think we're up to almost $200 million worth of deals in our pipeline right now. And that will close over the next year to year and a half. But that's not something that just happened overnight. We've been working on that for the last 2 years. So I think that's the biggest thing, biggest piece of advice for your listeners I have.
That's awesome. So sorry, I had to pause there because people got to be patient. So if they're not willing to be patient, this is going to be a tough thing. A lot of people with flipping houses, they can close quick. They can go in there and start pounding things down. And all of a sudden it becomes, this is just one of those things where they just got to work at it. But the payouts are huge in the end, right?
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to the bigger the problem you solve, the bigger you get rewarded.
Love that. That's beautiful statement.
Yeah. I mean, we're solving massive need, and we're building something that's going to be around for the next 50 to 100 years. And we're building something that's brand new, that's literally going to be the best in the market when it opens. So, and we have cities that are clamoring for this stuff. And it takes a lot of work to get these things done. So, and there is risk of course, with development and real estate. And so you get paid commensurate to all of that. And so there's a lot of upside on these deals just through developer fee and through the back end cash flow. That's the beautiful thing of what we do, is we can reward ourselves, our company, our investors as well, our impact investors. And the kicker, the cherry on top is we get to help our residents and the community too.
Well, it's like win, 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 win. That was a good way to look at it. Now, real quick, talk about tax credits, because not a lot of people understand tax credits. That word's thrown around all the time, but not many people understand what is it. What is a tax credit? How does it work? I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, well, what good would a tax credit do? I don't need a tax write-off. But it's more than that. Tax credits are massively in demand. I mean, there's a lot of people that want to buy tax credits. So can you just take a second and just explain tax credits to the listeners?
Yeah, definitely. So credits, in a nutshell, tax credits, what we do with tax credits is, within affordable housing, the federal government wants to incentivize development. And so they hand out tax credits every year to each state. And then the state housing agency has the authority to then allocate it towards affordable housing projects to help incentivize affordable housing development. And so if our project were to get awarded credits, then we get usually 40% of our construction costs are covered by the credits. And we don't actually use the credits themselves to pay for the development. We go out on the market and there are buyers for credits. So you think about there's all these big national banks or even regional banks that all have annual tax liability, and they're actually required to buy these credits. So it kind of is a double, it hits two needs for the banks, and it hits the need for, they actually need to buy these credits. And then the second one is that it actually offsets dollar for dollar any tax liability that they have on the bank. And so if you look at it from the bank's perspective, as long as they're technically paying less than $1, then they're already getting a return on their investment, because if they pay 90 cents per credit dollar, they're getting a 10% yield on that credit. Now, on top of the credit, they're also getting all the losses and depreciation. So their total return is actually higher than that. But the benefit to this is that we can take the credit, and then as soon as we get that award, that's worth 40% of our development in cash. Wow. That's all we need to give the investor. Is all they want is the credits, the losses, and the depreciation. They don't want any of the upside. It's not like your typical any sort of real estate investment. You literally look at cash flow, and you look at appreciation, and you look at losses as well. But that's kind of the third bucket. The main two you look at as appreciation and cash flow. Well, we as the owner and operator and the general partner, we actually get to keep all of that, the appreciation and cash flow. They just want the credits, losses, and depreciation. So that's the beautiful thing is they don't want any of the upside. They just want the downside. And that helps fill 40% of our project. So it's not for you as the individual or you as the one putting the deal together. It's for you to go out and sell to the market and get cash in return.
That's awesome. Because I mean, in you doing these different projects, these affordable housing projects, you're just getting the tax credits as a nature of this project because it's a benefit to the community, correct?
Right. Yeah,
and then
exactly.
you then take them to banks. And I didn't know banks had to buy them. I knew that they wanted. I thought there was an unlimited demand for tax credits. I mean, it only makes sense why a bank or any institution from Wall Street to your Main Street bank would want these things when they can buy them 10 cents, or 10% off, and then they get dollar for dollar. It just makes logical money sense.
Right.
But I didn't realize that they had to buy them. That's interesting.
Yeah, so we have a built-in demand. It was basically a Community Reinvestment Act of 1986 said that banks have to avoid redlining. And, I'm sure your listeners probably have some idea of redlining, of where banks were basically just not even lending at all, literally redlining literally the poor or low-income neighborhoods of cities. And so the federal government said, X that, we can't do that anymore. And so they actually require them to invest in certain things. Low-income housing tax credits is one of the ways they have a CRA score that is given out annually to every bank. And so if a bank wants to merge or expand to a new market, they have to have a good CRA score. They can't even have an average. They have to have a good or excellent score before they can even expand. So we have that built-in demand for our credits.
That's just fascinating. And I didn't know that. I mean, I'm always learning, and this stuff is, a lot of times when people are looking at real estate, they're not thinking, I'm going to dive into a $55 million property. So let's hit that real quick, Evan. Let's say we're talking to some people out there that are maybe 20s, maybe they're just coming out of college, maybe they're in their 50s, doesn't matter what their age is. And they're like, I could never do a giant project that would scare me. Like, how would you talk to somebody that maybe thinks this is just too big for them, which is why they're looking at maybe just wholesaling or maybe just a flip here and there, because that's more in their scope of what they can afford. It's not, what you do isn't about what you can afford, right? Can you hit on that? Because I think the mindset, when you say 55 million or 200 million, people they just tune out. They're like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't do that. Evan can't write a $200 million check. We get that, but it's not that. People just don't take that extra step to understand that it's not about your actual resources. It's about how resourceful you can be. So let's hit on that one real quick, because I think a lot of people need to hear this.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I think the biggest thing for me was having that mindset of saying, I just have to pull together the pieces to do this deal. I don't have to have the resources myself. It just comes down to my mindset of what I believe is actually accomplishable. And so for me, I guess I started out just naive and not knowing what was or wasn't possible. But I just fell in love with the idea. I was like, these are really cool looking buildings. It's literally as plain as that. I was like, man, these are really cool looking. And I started working for a developer that was doing it. I was literally paid $15 an hour working for this guy. But just learning from him, I was like, oh, well, he's smart, but he's not he's not a genius or something. I could learn what he's doing. And I think that's part of it too, is realizing that it doesn't all have to be you. Realizing that you can just pull together the pieces to do these deals, thinking bigger, and surrounding yourself by people that are already doing it. That infinitely makes it more achievable. I even as a side note, I think about I have friends that are just crushing it on TikTok. And at first I was like, TikTok, those are for little kids that dance around or moms that make, funny videos. But I saw some of my friends doing it and I was like, you know what? It is possible. It is achievable. If you have people that are doing it and being successful, you're putting yourself in places where you're surrounding yourself with people that are successful, masterminds, exactly what you and I are speaking at, in a month, and what we spoke at back in October. It's about putting yourself in the right rooms where it becomes achievable in your mind first. because without that, it would never become possible. So me working directly hand in hand with the developer, and he was like a 1-2 man shop, and he did a $55 million deal. So I was like, oh, this is totally achievable. I can do that. And I think that's just the mindset I had. And then, I worked for that developer. The first deal I did was 192 units, $30 million. I was 23 years old at the time. That is the power of thinking big and thinking, believing in yourself, but also putting yourself in the right room too.
What would you say during this journey, your biggest external obstacle has been in you getting where you're at?
That's a good question, because I think a lot of my obstacles start in your mind, and realizing what they are and getting rid of them as quickly as possible. So externally, though, I would say it really just has to come down to the amount of a couple different things. It comes down to the development process. What we do is very time intensive. You take real estate investing and you kind of add on like 100 layers to that, and that's development. You have to get so many approvals, from environmental to permitting to state credits to any other funding. You have tax credit equity partners. You have all, we have closing calls. We'll have 30 plus people on these calls. So bringing all those people to the table and getting them all moving in the same direction takes a lot of time, a lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of everything, a lot of touch. So I think the biggest things for me are us building out our team as quickly as we can to be able to handle more deal flow. And then I think ultimately, outside of our team, I think it's just how can we best work with the state agencies and the funding that is available, because there isn't unlimited resources for what we do. Unfortunately, I wish there was, but there is not. So it's figuring out where our time is best spent with the amount of resources per state. So each state has their own bucket of funding. So it's aligning our time and our interests with each state and the amount of funding they have. So we're almost tapped out at Tennessee, basically. So we're like, what other markets can we go to? We're considering Texas, we're considering Florida. Where can we spend our time where there's massive need for affordable housing, and there's the match of, having that available funding to match the need too.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said Texas and Florida, because those would be two places I can imagine I'd almost think there's almost an unlimited need. I think you could probably spend the rest of your career in those markets there, just kind of building those out, because those areas are exploding right now, especially with what's happening. So that's an interesting one. And, now you teach people how to do this. So because a lot of people still are having that mindset where they can't get over that hump of this is too big, or this would take too long, or I'd go broke in the process. So where would somebody go about starting, and how would they work with you is it like a mentorship? Is it an internship? Like, what does that look like if somebody wanted to learn this and start working with you the way you did it in the beginning?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, like we talked about earlier, is putting yourself in the right rooms. And so hands down, the best way, the two ways I can think to do that are, one, because we'd been asked this so many times over and over again, we're like, a lot of people have said, Evan, I love what you're doing. I want to do what you do. And so that's what made us start Affordable Development Mastery. You can check out our coaching program. It's just affordabledevelopmentmastery.com. And that will basically, we're going through the program now with 22 coaching clients, and they're from A to Z as far as their experience level. We have from appraisers who have been in the appraisal business but have never actually gone into real estate investment, all the way up to those that are in multifamily investing already but want to make the switch to development. So I say that to say that there are a lot of people just like yourself listening now who may not have that much experience on the investment side, but start out with a passion to solve a problem. Because I think, no matter if you want to solve big problems, you have to be passionate about it, or else you're going to give up long before you can actually really make an impact. And so that was the biggest criteria. That was one of the biggest criteria to get into our coaching program was, do you have passion to solve affordable housing and create attainable housing in your community? And I think that's number one, because without that, you will be successful with that. Without that, you will not. And so that was the biggest thing we look for. So we have very entry-level real estate investors in our program that I know are going to be successful. And what our coaching program teaches is how to bring together the pieces. We don't expect you to have a whole development team. We don't expect you to have millions of dollars in capital. This program is made for individuals, just like I was when I got started. I literally had nothing but myself and my fiance helping me. That was our team. And building that from nothing, finding capital partners, finding JV partners. That's a big part of getting started, is finding those partners that already had the experience, that already have the capital. So you don't have to be able to pull all the pieces of the puzzle together. So really taking it from there all the way to the finish line and saying, how do you get the pieces together? How do you move everybody in the right direction? And how do you get across that finish line and get yourself paid and create long-term attainable housing? So I think that's the best way. And then the other way is the way I did when I started, was I learned directly by working for somebody else. I think the apprenticeship model is something that a lot more people should consider. I think, everybody's like, oh, I want to start my company tomorrow. But think about how, I learned for 6 years from, the combined leaders of the company had over 100 years experience doing exactly what I want to do. And I could literally call them at any moment. I had an office 10 feet away from them. Having that intimate access literally gave me quantum leaps in my growth, because I learned from their literally tens of millions of dollars worth of mistakes. I learned from that. So now I'm also able to pass that on to our affordable development mastery clients, because that's the beauty of learning from somebody else, is you're taking their mistakes and, trying to make as little of them as possible as you can, so you can make your own mistakes that are maybe less costly.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think we live in a little bit of a me society where everybody wants me, me, me. They want everything right now. It's that mentality, my way right now. And, it should be more of a we. And you learned in a we kind of setting where you went and got that internship, which led to the mentorship and got you that knowledge. But that took years. And a lot of people don't want to wait the years. But if someone just kind of sat back and said, if I just put a couple of years into this, you're going to put a couple of years into a college degree. You're going to put a couple of years into a residency. If you're doing that, you're not going to hardly get paid much. Everything you're going to do anyway, you're going to have a couple of years of not making much. Just face it. That's what it's going to be. You want to start a business? Most businesses don't make money for the first 5 years. So get that through your head. And welcome to reality. So you give up a couple of years to learn from some of the best in the business, from some of the people already doing it. That knowledge then can be applied to what it is you're doing. So we said it earlier, it's not about knowledge. That's only part of the problem, or part of the solution. It's about the application of knowledge. And I think there's a lot to be said. And I love that you said you got to solve people's problems. It's the number one thing that we all have to do. The great Zig Ziglar said, if you solve enough people's problems, they will solve yours. It's very true. And that's all he does. He solves big problems. And I don't care if you guys are out there solving little problems, medium problems, or big problems. Solve someone else's problem, not yours. Because if you focus on somebody else's or something else, problem that you can solve for somebody else, then that problem that you solve will then solve whatever problems you have. And it's hard for people to believe when they're maybe at a low point in their life or they're at a hard time. COVID's created a lot of hardships for people, and a lot of people just feel hopeless. But hopelessness isn't going to get you where you want to be. It's going out there and actually taking the action steps to do it that will. So one more time, if they want to learn more about working with you, what is it? It's Affordable Development Mastery. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. Affordable Development Mastery. We'll put it in the show notes, folks. And Evan, thank you so much for sharing your story and telling everybody about this, because honestly, there's no goal too big. Matter of fact, if your dreams don't scare you, folks, they're just not big enough. Evan, I appreciate you coming on the show. And for all of you listening to this, wow, right? You just learned a lot about a topic that no one else is really talking about, because the developers in your town aren't willing to show you the ropes in most cases, or maybe they are if you just ask. People are too afraid to ask, and that is that action taken. So remember what I said, on your journey to becoming a rebel banker, it's not the knowledge, it's the application of knowledge. Go out there, take action, get things done. And remember my challenge? 2 free books, or 1, whichever one you want. Go to chrisnoggle.com, one swipe, click on free book, and get it off to you. That's taking action any which way you do it. That's all the same. Thanks everybody for joining us for another episode. We'll see you the next time.